And I'm going to hit the intro button. The music will go, and we'll get started. Here we go. Hello and welcome into the Section 109 podcast from Studio Breezy. There's no Mix and Toby today. They're with their grandparents. But we do have Bobble Juan, Matthew, and CEO Alton Byrd. AB, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Are you cool if we call you AB?
Yes.
I hope so, because we already did that.
That is easily the most simple way to get my name right.
Yeah. Do you have a? I would assume here, especially with Alton Park as a neighborhood being a pretty established part of Chattanooga, are you getting a lot of mispronunciations of your name?
There are, yeah. That happens more regularly than I would expect, but that's to be expected. Nobody knew who I was, and I'm pretty sure that the universe hasn't run into many Altons in their time on the planet, so we make it work.
What did the Brits call you? And we're going to get into your journey, but I know you spent a lot of time in the UK.
It's hilarious. They called me a lot of things, none of which started with my name as a player, but most of them called me Alton. And then there was one supporters group in Doncaster in England who started taking the mickey out of me, and they started calling me All-Tin, Alltin, because they said you can never be fouled when you're on the court, so you're really the Tin Man. I was like, okay, that has reached some new levels here. So I was christened Alton, but everybody in the UK called me Alton.
Yeah. So you haven't been able to get away from it.
No. That's why AB kind of came to fruition. It was easy. Everybody could remember the first two letters of the alphabet.
Sure.
And so it made sense.
Well, and as another guy who has AB as initials, it's good initials. They're great initials, in fact.
Yeah.
Right before we get into your soccer journey questions, I want to start out hot on this podcast. What is your most controversial food take, do you think?
Well, let me qualify the question. When you say food take, what do you mean by food take?
Food opinion. Meaning, I believe that hot dogs are better with mayonnaise. That is not a common thought. In fact, for Matthew, it's heresy. The Brits like beans on toast, which I think most Americans think is heresy. Everyone, I think, has food opinions that are unpopular, but they stick to, right? They feel very strongly about. Do you have a food opinion or a food take that is very dear to you that maybe others might disagree with? I
do, and they relate to onions.
Okay.
That I think onions are easily the most antisocial social food group on the planet. Why? Because to a lot of people they taste great, but they absolutely ruin everything else about your social being during the course right after that. So I'm not an onion guy. I can't correlate onions and then being able to have any kind of social interaction with another human being without blowing their hair back.
Yeah. So no onions for you.
So no onions for me.
Okay.
No onions on the burger. All right. So let's go back to when you were a kid. Obviously, you've got a long history of being a professional athlete and a professional sports executive. So take us back to the start of your playing career, if you would, and that might be when you started playing as a kid, and kind of take us through, where'd you grow up? What's your story? And then, let's kind of go from there.
Yeah, I grew up in San Francisco. I think a rare person. You usually don't find people who were born and raised in San Francisco because they're usually a transplant for technology reasons or for professional reasons. Most people who lived in San Francisco moved once housing got to be crazy. Once the price of their family houses went beyond a certain number, it was like, well, why don't we just sell our house and move somewhere way more affordable? With that said, I started playing sports at 7. So I started playing basketball at 7. I played basketball, baseball, and soccer. I played soccer for about 3 weeks. Well, the reason why is I played in a league where I was faster than everybody else. I scored 6 goals in my first 2 games, and then I was discouraged from coming back because they were like, you're just not good. You're way too good, and you should play somewhere else. I have other reasons why I think that happened, but that said, I was like, okay. So I started playing baseball. I started playing basketball. I think I played basketball because it was the easiest and least expensive of all the sports, and I could do it myself, kind of like soccer. The two sports that are the world's maybe most popular sports are the two most inexpensive sports. You don't need pads. You don't need to play with anybody else. You can develop your skills. You can get better day by day, hour by hour if you work at it. So I started playing basketball. I loved baseball. It is my first love. But when I got to high school, it just became, we didn't practice at school. We had to go to another site to practice. And, my day just became ridiculously long. My first class was 7:45. My last class was 3:00. We didn't practice until 5. We finished practice at 7. Then I had to go back across town, San Francisco. I'd get home at 9:00. And so baseball became basketball. Practice started at 3:30. I was home by 5. Homework by 7. Back in the gym by 7:15. It was a much more social sport. So I gave up baseball sophomore year in high school, and I played basketball literally every day that I humanly possibly could. I read Outliers, and the entire 10,000 hours to become. I kind of feel like I became a master of basketball because I did 10,000 hours in a summer. That was my way of getting really good at it. So that basketball journey really was created starting at 7, and then we had a schoolyard literally 2 blocks from my house, and I spent most of my waking hours, nights, weekends. There was a rec center not far from me, and the truth is, I loved it. I knew I could get better at it, and while I was small, I just thought I could develop the skills that I would be able to progress with. And when I got to high school, I got to be even better at it.
Now, in baseball, what position did you play?
Second base. Well, here's how how the sport outgrows you. So I was a pitcher in Little League, a really good pitcher. And then I went, obviously, to the bigger diamond, and the fastball became a changeup. And so our coach said, you probably want to play second base. And so I played second base. I love baseball, but like at the end of the day, it just socially didn't work with school and education. And,
sure.
Yeah.
But I loved baseball, and I played second base, played a little bit of shortstop. And as the diamonds got bigger, I didn't. And my arm, which was super effective on a smaller diamond, just kind of petered out then.
Did you have a favorite number to wear in baseball?
I think there's not a kid in San Francisco that didn't want to wear 24 for Willie Mays. To me, he's the greatest baseball player ever. And the Giants have always been my home baseball team. So, if you look at the lineage with, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonds, like they just had all kinds of great players, and everybody wanted to wear 24. Well, I did. I wanted to wear 24.
And then in basketball, point guard?
I played the point. I've never played anything but the point. My size kind of moves me out of power forward, center, small forward, and off guard. So I played the point and have always had the ball in my hands, or always had the ball in my hands. And, my skills evolved from that. And so I was comfortable, and I played the point literally from the first time I touched the ball to the last time I touched the ball.
Were you a scorer first or a passer first?
Passer first. I had this belief that if I made everybody else around me better, that there would be rewards for that. And I just by nature am unselfish. I kind of like people to get better. It's kind of translated into my business career. How can I develop? How can I grow talent? How can I help people grow? But I've always been a pass-first point guard.
Gotcha. Did you develop a scoring streak later in your career? Or what I mean by that is like, did your game develop as you got older, or were you always just a pass first, make the?
Yeah, every game kind of determined the strategic direction of how I saw the game flow. So there'd be games where I'd get 35, Those are games we usually lost. And only because if my job was to help people score and to create opportunities for me for efficient scoring, and I had to do that job, it means that everybody else was having an off night. And that wasn't going to be good for us overall.
Yeah.
The distribution of the ball. I kind of liken my role to a midfielder. Like if you're really good as a midfielder in football and soccer, you're spraying the ball all over the place and people have really cool opportunities to score. If you're the guy that's got to score 2 or 3 goals in a football match, you're going to have some challenges. That means your guys up front aren't getting the service they should.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I noticed you. I went through your Wikipedia, which I hadn't done. Which someone's got to update that, y'all. No longer the senior vice president of community relations and growth properties, which we'll definitely get to. But I also noticed you were the 4-time BBL MVP.
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons I asked about the scoring question, because not a lot of. It's hard to get an MVP award without being a scorer.
Well, and
I'm not saying you couldn't score. That's why I was asking the question.
The teams I played for during the times that I got MVP, and I won them 10 years apart. I won back-to-back when I first got to Europe, and then back-to-back in 90-91. And the teams that I played on were all-time great Guinness World Book of Record type teams. Like, as you know, in Europe, there's competitions. There's multiple competitions. There's your league, then there's your league cup, then there's the playoffs, and then there's another cup, and then there's another cup, and then there's 52 different competitions. One year we won all of them. We were the first team ever in British basketball history to win all of the cups. It was a clean sweep.
Nice.
But the role that I played was to facilitate and to make sure that in championship winning opportunities, we won. We'd have great league seasons. So I kind of look at it as not the guy that led the league in scoring, but the guy that was the most effective, similar to Steve Nash.
Oh, yeah.
If you take a Steve Nash or you take a Derrick Rose who won MVP, maybe not the league's leader in scoring, but exciting, team won.
Most
influential, got it determined, come up with a steal, get a rebound, take an offensive charge, something that shifted or altered the game. And I did it enough during a whole season that 4 times people said that guy's the best player in the league. So I was very lucky, and I have to say I played on some incredible teams, guys that probably were better players than me, but I think knitting it together made sense.
Absolutely.
A lot of American guys?
We didn't have a lot of American guys, but as European rules changed, there was the Bosman ruling, which meant for the first time you could have this mix of the French could play as actual national players, and the Italians could play in France, and the French could play in Greece, and the Greeks could play in Belgium. And so we did have European players, and then we also had naturalized Americans, or guys that were born in the UK who lived in the United States and played college basketball who decided to go back to the UK to play. We had a lot of, I would call U.S.-trained players, U.S. coach players, and collegiate players. So it actually helped. But for the most part, our team was British, English, and we had a really good developmental system where we created opportunities for kids to play at a high level. And our team played in Europe every year. So we were in the European Cup. We were in the Champions League Cup. We were, a couple of times we were close to making the Final Four in the EuroLeague Cup. So we always had good English talent.
What was that European competition like? I mean, amongst going, like, where all did you play outside of England on some of those? Like, what was that like?
It was great. It was So I'll say, my career, we played in every country in Europe at least twice. So you go to Greece, you go to Spain, you go to Italy, you go to France, you go to Belgium, you go to the Netherlands, Sweden. We went to Russia before the wall came down, which was interesting. We played in Germany. We played in Czechoslovakia. So it's always great. I always say the greatest education you can get is travel. You get to see how other people live. You get to see what they eat. You get to see how they socialize, how they interact. It's just an incredible education to be able to travel. And every year we would do this bonding trip. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen, but we'd go on this road trip to start the season, and it would be 2 weeks. And we get in cars and carpool, and we drive from London to Belgium to Holland to France, and it's 14 days of craziness. Mixed in with that, a game every other day. So you're playing 7 games in 14 days.
Ooh.
And it's a lot, plus travel, plus really bad hotels. The good thing about traveling in Europe is really hard to find a bad meal. Even if you want to look for a bad meal, it's hard to find one, especially France, Belgium, and Holland.
Yeah, nice.
Where's the if you could choose one place where, like, you were offered, let's say, a job and a ridiculous salary and the perfect life, where would you move tomorrow?
Barcelona would be first, and Monaco would be second.
There you go.
All right,
Love
okay.
that answer.
And the ironic thing is, I turned down an offer to play in Monaco at AS Monaco, where Kemba Walker is going now. I turned down an offer to play there. My wife was pregnant with my daughter, and she was 6 months pregnant. The offer came. I got the offer to fly to Monaco to meet with Prince Albert and meet the coaching staff. And I had just signed an extension with the club I was with in Scotland. And, the owner of our team in Scotland said, well, if you go to Monaco, you can't come back here, even if you go for a visit. And I said, I understand that. I just signed. I'd done 3 years. I'd signed a 2-year extension. And he was right, and I didn't go. And to this day, I regret not going. I love Scotland. I love the Scots. They are the most loyal, friendliest, really cool people on the planet. But that was one I was like, yeah, I think I'd probably still be there if I'd be speaking French. Both my children would be speaking French. Everybody would be speaking French. It'd be great food. So
The payday probably would have
been pretty cool. So, yeah.
Let's go back a little bit to your high school. Talk about, like, I guess, the recruiting process that you went through. You ended up at Columbia to play basketball there on the East Coast.
Not just an athlete, got to have a big brain to be at Columbia, man.
Yeah.
Not a lot of guys go professional. Sorry, Columbia, out of the Ivy League schools or Columbia, right? Like, it's more for the brains. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the recruiting processes, I played high school basketball at a Catholic high school in San Francisco. My first 2 years were kind of rocky. It was a difficult transition to come from a neighborhood in San Francisco that was primarily poverty driven to go to a private Catholic white high school in another part of the city. There was some human transitions. There were some, there was some education. There was some racial education I had to kind of come to grips with. Like, sometimes you're not always as welcome as you would hope to be. And that happened my first year or two in high school. But as I started to kind of integrate myself into what is the culture of a really strict, focused educational opportunity, which is why my mother really wanted me to go. It's a really funny story. I was supposed to go to a high school that was literally 15 minutes from my front door. And the day before I was due to register, one of my 8th grade teachers said, hey, this high school would be better for you, and if you're really serious about playing basketball and getting a good education, you should go here. I listened to him. The problem was the high school was an hour away, and my mom went way left. Like, why would you go there and you could go here? It's both Catholic high schools, both. And so I ended up picking Reardon High School, went there, an hour each way every day. A minimum of an hour each way every day was heavy for my mom to accept. But I got there. Freshman year, we had a good team. Sophomore year, I played JVs. I wasn't mature enough to play varsity. I wasn't physically or emotionally ready to play varsity. And then I played varsity my junior year. We were one of the 5 best teams in the state of California. High school basketball in California is enormous. It's huge. We were really good. And, from there on, like senior year, I was a high school All-American. I got recruited. By University of San Francisco, Stanford, UC Berkeley, teams in Idaho, teams in Washington, teams in Texas, Cornell, Columbia, and all I kept hearing in my ear was my mom saying, "You have to be prepared for the day when you're not going to be able to play. You have to get your education. You have to be realistic. Like, yo, you 5'7", you weigh 142 pounds. Like, I don't know how much longer your career is going to be."
Joke's on her. But she's also right. I'm sure Columbia
Yes.
did you well.
Right. And I had a chance to go to University of San Francisco and said, like, if I get into an Ivy League school, I'm going Ivy. And she wasn't happy about it. She tried to talk me into going to Stanford and say, you should go to Berkeley. She wanted me to stay closer to home.
Sure.
And I was kind of on this curious journey, which has kind of been endemic about my life, is go on the journey, see what's out there, see what you can see, learn what you can learn, visit places. And I got into Columbia, and from there on, it was, I remember the first day I got into Columbia, having been accepted. I played for Tom Penders, who then went on to Fordham, and he went to George Washington. He's in Texas's Ring of Honor. He's in Houston's Ring of Honor. He's the all-time leading winner at Texas basketball, Texas men's basketball. And I played for him, and from there, going to New York, the first day I got to New York, I just remember looking up in the sky and going, this is very different than San Francisco. Everything was moving at warp speed. I felt like I was in some kind of warp speed, Star Wars. Everybody's moving faster. New Yorkers are about their business. There's no kind of small talk. Yep, nope, off we go. So it was a real education. The process, a lot of people write letters, and a lot of people call, and a lot of people want to come visit, and a lot of people watch you play, and you get to figure out. I think players spend more time loving the idea of being recruited than than they should, because it's mutual. You have to interview people much like they interview you. You have to look at their track record. You have to look at their history. You have to ask the coaches, what happened to this player? What happened to that player? Why didn't he graduate? Where did he go? How come he didn't play? Like, those things matter. So it was at Columbia, my first and only recruiting trip. I got a chance to have lunch at the top of what was the Pan Am building. It's now the MetLife building, with Julius Erving's doctor. That's who I had lunch with. I was like,
that's who they sent
that's
for
who
you.
they sent for me to have lunch with. It was a guy named Dr. Sheldon Purcell, and we had lunch at the top of this building. And I remember going like, man, if I get into this school, I'm going here, because like all I could see was all these little yellow cabs at like 75 floors down. And it was really cool. Recruitment is stressful. I'm sure kids now with social media have a way different set of problems than we did. We didn't have social media. We didn't, you could only call at a certain time. Your parents would pick up the phone and go, you can't talk to him right now. He's doing his homework. Call tomorrow. That could be John Wooden. I don't care who you are. You're not talking to my son now. So
Yeah.
it's very different.
I think your recruiting lunch experience was a little nicer than mine. The nice ribs at Montgomery Inn in Cincinnati were not
Not the same.
not quite the 75th floor of the MetLife building.
Yes. It was like, wow. I remember being wowed. I was like, this is impressive.
Now, you got drafted by the Boston Celtics.
I did.
There's on TikTok and which I'm not on, but Reels and whatever else. I'm getting a lot of funny content basketball wise. I grew up basketball fan. I don't know how I got in this lane of my algorithm, but I'm getting a bunch of like people talking about Larry Bird. Now, you guys were drafted the same year, correct?
We were.
Were you in camp with him at all?
I was.
So a court, and you can obviously plead the fifth on this if you, or whatever if you don't want to talk. But they say he was a legendary trash talker.
He was.
So
he is.
Those stories are real about
They
his?
are. So the first time I saw him play, and I kind of, you know how you sit in rookie camp and you kind of go, I'm better than that. You know, you start comparing. I'm
Sure.
better than that guy. I played at this level. I'm better than that guy. Like, he was better than everybody by a long shot. Like, he was just better. He has really innate basketball sense. He has really good emotional balance, as a player. He knew how to make shots. He was just, he was experienced above his age and just had a much better basketball sense. He and Magic are kind of two. They saved the NBA. They literally saved the NBA. Those two guys had, as players, sixth sense about how to make people better. And Larry Bird was absolutely one of the game's best trash talkers, and he did it his whole career.
What's the best thing trash talking wise that he ever said to you?
Though, like, I saw him on court say to people, "This is what I'm going to do. You can't stop me, and I'm just telling you what I'm going to do." And then he'd do it, and they say, "I told you couldn't stop." Like, that's just Larry. Larry was like, rude. And he would do that in the middle of game sevens. But at camp, he was just like, "You can't guard me," because there's this whole thing about black players who thought white players may not be as good as black players, and people would walk away from playing against Larry going, "He just humiliated me," like, because he could flat out ball. He was just a great player, and the nicest guy. It's like he was competitive but very humble dude. But like if you challenged him on court, he'd let you have it.
Yeah, so like one of those, like, a good friend, nice guy in person, but on the court was not.
Yeah, not the guy you want to piss off. He's the guy that could get 30 and a quarter. Right?
It's like there's an MJ story out there where somebody said something to him at I think it was at like the end of the first quarter or something. Somebody said something to him, or end of the first half. He's like, you're not that. Somebody makes one comment and then he scores 40 in the second half.
Yeah, like there's some guys, Michael, Kobe, Larry, Magic, Kareem, like you piss them off enough and it gets their adrenaline flowing. They have innate skills. They know how to score, when to score, how to do things that get you in foul trouble. They're just ahead of all of those guys were ahead of their time. They were well ahead of their time. And Larry was really ahead of his time because when he came out of college, he was a little bit older, but he hadn't played this robust college schedule like Magic did at Michigan State. He playing the Big Ten. That's competitive. Indiana State's not playing that kind of schedule. So when he did play against more competitive players with more competitive experience, he stood up. And I thought he was a phenomenal player. One of the best trash talkers. He took no prisoners. He was like, I trash talk to everybody. If you say something to me and you get off kilter, I'll help you find your way back.
You can all get it.
Yes.
You can all get it.
He was an equal opportunity trash talker.
Were you a trash talker on the court?
Time to time, yes. I didn't have that kind of need to trash talk. I figured that no matter what, I'll just beat you. So I didn't think it was necessary. There were times when most people would say, like, I'd have moments when I would say something like, you have no chance. Like, that you can't guard me. You'll never be able to guard me. And tonight I'm giving you 40. Or I just say, we're going to win, you're going to lose. And I don't know what's that feel like? Knowing, like, almost immediately, we're going to beat you. So, but I didn't have that repertoire like some guys. Some guys just have a repertoire of trash.
Yeah.
They build it up over time,
Yeah, they're waiting for it.
They're waiting. Yeah, they've developed a skill set around trash talking. The only thing about trash talking is sooner or later it backfires. Sooner or later,
Somebody does get
somebody does get you, and somebody does say something, and somebody does make you fall. You know, I kind of watch football, and I watch guys who have really good football skills, dribbling or controlling the ball, and they can make one quick move and a defender falls, and you kind of go, "Oh, that's terrible."
Oh, the Michigan Stars player that fell down when Mumu crossed him up at the edge of the box in the first half.
Or when Jesus absolutely wrecked somebody
at
in the
Maryland. Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So,
let's move into transitioning from after you're drafted by the Celtics to moving to play in Europe.
Well, it all came about because an alum from Columbia said, "Hey, I've got this company," which happened to be a company that was the world's largest pharmaceutical market research company, called IMS, Intercontinental Medical Statistics. He owned the majority of the shares. I would liken it to or compare it to AC Nielsen, except it was for pharmaceuticals. And he owned this business. Unbeknownst to me, he'd watched most of my college basketball games when he was in New York. His corporate headquarters was in London. And he said, "Look, if you don't make the NBA, would you like to come work for me in London?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know about that. That's further away." So I graduate the end of May. I go over to see London. Didn't like it. Cold, rainy, wet, miserable. Bad food, all of the stuff that you hear about generically. Got drafted by the Celtics, worked out all summer. He gave me a summer job, and I did some work for him over the summer. Went to camp the night before I left for the Celtics rookie camp. My right arch fell, and so I went to camp anyway. I only played one day. But he said, "Look, if you don't make it," he called me the day before and he said, "Look, I hope you don't make it." Okay.
Thanks, man.
I mean, yeah.
Cool.
But it was ironic because I didn't make it, and I went back to California after rookie camp and literally went to London. And we went on tour with the team, and like, the first trip I ever made in Europe, we stayed at the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. We actually stayed in the stadium. They had rooms in the stadium. So I'm in the Olympic Stadium where Jesse Owens had won his Olympic goals, where Hitler had done his thing. So that was my first trip.
That's intense.
To Europe. And like preseason training was run the stairs, use the track. It was, you play games at night and you do your conditioning in the morning. The Europeans train that way. They do all of their technical work and then they train as a team at night. So you do your shooting and conditioning in the morning and then you practice at night. So we did that. And I was expecting to be in Europe for a year and I stayed 20. I was expecting to be in London and then transfer to one of his other. He had offices in 37 countries. He's like, "Pick one," and I was like, "Okay, that sounds pretty cool." He had an office in Ambler, Pennsylvania, which is where their U.S. headquarters was. He had a small office in Menlo Park on the West Coast. He had an office in London. He had an office in Frankfurt. He had offices everywhere, but it was kind of like pick one. And so I stayed a year, and he said, "Look, if you want to play while you're here, why don't you play?" And I was like, I don't want it to get in the way of work. And he's like, "Don't worry, it won't get in the way of work." He knew, like, I was going to come and play, and I was really the first point guard. Usually the two Americans who got picked were usually of size. They
Big men.
Yeah, they were usually a power forward and center or two power forwards. So I was the first point guard to arrive and play on a team and really kind of transform the perception of guards playing in Europe. And, I played a year, got player of the year. We were 50-5. We lost 5 games. We won the cup. We won the league. We won the playoffs. We were undefeated. We lost 1 game in the league. We got a chance to play against Real Madrid, which was the first time I had seen this whole football, basketball collaboration. We got a chance to travel kind of all over Europe, and it was a really cool experience. I stayed 2 more years in London. Then I went to Scotland and played 5 years. Worked for David Murray, who ultimately ended up buying Glasgow Rangers. So he bought that team. And then I did 2 years in Manchester, the year I played at Manchester United before I ripped up my Achilles tendon.
Oof.
Took a year off.
You did. If you're going to do an injury, you did the big one.
Yeah, I did the big one. But the funny thing is, it's different for guys that are smaller. They recover differently. Like big guys who snap an Achilles tendon tend to have different levels of issues. There's more of them. There's not as much of me. So I snapped mine August 31st, and I was playing again February.
Wow.
And I didn't play competitively, but I was actually on the floor taking shots, running around. And then I played in a game in May, which is 9 months later.
Wow.
So
that's fast.
Yeah. And it was really cool. I moved back to London in 1989, and I was there until I moved to the States in 1999.
I think for one specific listener, he'll find this really interesting. One of the London clubs you played for was Crystal Palace.
That is true.
Shout out Taylor.
Two different stints, correct?
Yeah, I played at Crystal Palace my first 3 years, and then I played at Crystal Palace my last 3 years. I went back to help elevate them from second division to Premier League, and we built this kind of academy of training. We had lots of teams. We had under 11, under 13, under 15, under 17, under 19. We built all of that in 3 years. We did the same with a women's program. And then we got promoted the first year. So we played about 2 miles from Crystal Palace Football Club, which is at Crystal Palace National Sports Center. And the first time I played at Palace, the owner of our club was also part owner of Crystal Palace Football Club. He just didn't tell us, right? So then when he passed away, our separation, we just had it in name, but it was never kind of connected. But people always saw us as Crystal Palace. Well, there's only one Crystal Palace Football Club, and
Yeah.
It was really cool. And playing at Crystal Palace was like, it's my fondest memory of playing in Europe because it's a legendary national sports center. It is where they have all of the big track and field in Europe meets. And as a national sports center, it's where all the Olympians train.
Was that your transition there into like front office management, that type of thing?
It actually came when I was in Scotland because the owner said, "Look, I want you to be player coach," and I was like, "I'm 24 years old. Like, what do I know about coaching?" Albeit I had done a lot of teaching and coaching, even in high school with little kids, and so it transferred. And I was a point guard, and I ended up hiring a good friend of mine named Paul, who ended up being my assistant for the first year I was there. So I did a little of everything. I was the head coach. I was the GM. I was the head of all commercial activities. And Edinburgh is a really cool city. And they have 2 football clubs there, Hibs and Hearts, which kind of like on the east side of Scotland, there's Rangers and Celtic.
Yeah.
And those 2 teams really passionately, fervently do not like each other.
Right.
And so I tended to stay neutral when it came to football discussions in Scotland. You go to a Hibs game or you go to a Hearts game and, you kind of go, "Which team do you support?" And I'm like, "Both. I support Edinburgh football. How about that?" So that was my first real understanding of how passionate people are about football, the legacy, how people were born into football families. Like if your parents are Hearts of Midlothian fans, you will
You
be
are.
too.
Yeah.
Or you will not be a part of that family. The same with Hibernian. If your family are Hibs fans and you were born into it, that means your dad and his dad and his dad. The legacy around football clubs in the United Kingdom is unlike any other. Like, and that doesn't matter whether it's Division 4 or Premier League. If you were born in as a Chelsea fan, then you will always be a Chelsea fan. Like, there's no, I'm going to support Tottenham. Like, that just won't happen in your family. And your parents have tickets, and your parents' parents have tickets. And so it just gets left, and it's unlike anything I've seen. I saw that at United, and like the difference between United and City is United is the traditional.
Yeah.
But so much of football is, based around religion, like especially in Scotland. If you're either Catholic or Protestant, it's the same in England, even though it's quiet. It's, this is a Protestant club, or this is a Catholic club, or it's a Jewish club, or it's like, none of that matters because they now have fandom. Because of social media, fandom is everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Matthew?
Well, I was just thinking, so you spent a lot of time in Europe. You spent a lot of time in England. You played for Manchester United. You count yourself as a Liverpool fan.
I do.
Yeah. How did that happen?
How did this come about?
So when I first got to the UK, Liverpool was the best team in the world, right? They had Kenny Dalglish, they had Graham Souness, they had Ian Rush, they had, you name all of the great players in Liverpool, and they were there. Bill Shankly is the manager, and I was just attracted to A, how they played, and B, the tradition. The whole, you'll never walk alone. And this was before Hillsborough. This is well before Hillsborough. But they were the first team that I saw play that I was like, I don't understand this football thing yet. But they seem to play it better than everybody else. My second favorite team was Tottenham. And only because they had Glenn Hoddle. As I got there and was there for long enough, they had Glenn Hoddle. They had some really talented players. And I like the way they play. For me, football is a style thing. Like, I kind of like to watch people who, it's kind of like the reason I like to watch Brazil play. The ball's always on the move. And I always said when I was a coach in basketball, I want to play basketball the way the Brazilians play football. The ball's moving. They've got a really good style quotient. It is fun to watch. And so the day I got there, I started watching. You don't have any choice in England. You got to pick a club, right? You have to pick a club. It's like if the three of us went, people would be like, this is the pub first question. Breezy, who do you support? And there's no right or wrong answer, but you
better have somebody.
But it better be an answer. It's going to shift the conversation.
Sure.
Like if you said, hey, I am a Brentford fan, people would be like, okay, good. Okay, I get it.
Everyone's allowed their choices.
Everybody's allowed their choices. If Matt said, hey, I am I don't know, pick a club. So.
He's a Spurs fan, so he's already got his own problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got 99 of them, but trophy ain't one.
Trophy's not
Winning
one.
a trophy's not one, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a CFC fan too, so
That's good
You got a
too.
whole bunch of trophies. All you got to do is go to Smo's shop, go to CFC shop, and they lined up like.
That's true.
The first time I walked into the stadium, and I went into the shop, and I was like, "Who won all those trophies?" I was like, "The club did." I was like, "Oh."
the thing you need to know about those trophies,
Matthew,
is
don't do
that
it.
We've never won the big one.
Yet.
That's right.
Yet.
That's right. That's right.
I hope you understand why I can't say yet.
Matthew's a superstitious sports fan. Speaking of superstitions, so skip around here. You've been in a lot of places, and I don't want to I would love to do a deeper dive at some point on some of those other places. I want to do them justice. But you've been an executive and a player in a lot of places. Do you have any sports superstitions that either in those particular places or that carry over even to now?
Number one is I do not like to be around other human beings when I'm either preparing. When I was a player, I didn't like to be. I drove to games on my own. I didn't like to talk to people before games. I didn't have conversations. I was in my mind, I'm preparing for the battle, and the battle is most important. So, I didn't like to talk to people. As an executive, I don't sit near people when I'm watching games. I don't, because my wife will tell you when I watch games at home, if it's a team that I support, like for the years that I was in Brooklyn, like I would just say, you have to go somewhere else to watch this game. You have to go to another room. I can't have a conversation because ultimately it becomes, well, what happened? That was a bad call. What do you think? And I'm like, in my head, I know what's happening, but I don't want to talk about it until like at the end. When the 49ers play, like I can't have, like if I can watch the game, I'm not having a conversation. Phone is off. That's it. I'm done. Like,
Sacred time.
Sacred, like that 2.5 or 3 hours. And my mood shifts if we win, right? Like if the Niners win, where are we going? Right?
Yeah,
if the Niners lose, I got to prepare for work tomorrow. Right? I'm not having this. So I get to Chattanooga and, I'm watching games and I'm trying to find places where I want to watch. I want to watch from a perspective of, are we playing good football? Are defensively, is our scheme working? Like, I look at it from a coach. I also look at it from an executive. And then I like to walk around and see what traffic flows are like. I like to watch, well, how many people come to the shop early? Do they come before the game? Do they come middle of the game? At halftime, do people run out? Where are they going? So that I understand how to make the experience better. And I can't do that if I've got
Someone's chirping in your ear.
Like,
asking you questions.
That's how I flow. I watch games on my own. I'll sit on my own. People will be like, what a weird dude. Like, he's just sitting here. I'm like, but I'm trying to gather the experience to see how I can make it better or more efficient or more fruitful, or so that our fans feel like they've got a sense of what we need to have an even better experience than we already have.
Sure. Perfect. How did you transition back from, well, actually, let me, I've read in part of your bio and I've listened to some of your interviews that you talked about a stint in NFL Europe. What was that? How did that come about and what was that like?
So I was at the end of my career basketball-wise, and the Monarchs were looking for a GM/team president, and they kept asking me, would you be interested? I was like, nah, I'm good. And then they asked, and I was like, nah, I'm good. I love football. I am an NFL fan, and I never saw myself working in the NFL. But they kept asking, and then they made me an offer, and I was like, nah, I'm good. And then they made me another offer, and I was like, and then they made me an offer. I was like, that'd be stupid not to say yes. It's 5 games. It isn't, it's not like a normal NFL season. It's 5 games, and it's the spring, summer, and then you're off. And so the experience was really helpful. I realized how big the NFL is. When you work in the NFL, you realize how big it is. The business is easily double the size of every other business. The television numbers, the finances, the partnerships. It's the only sport in the world that owns 3 days a week.
Yeah.
You plan your life around NFL football. It's not the other way around. So you don't go out if your team's playing Sunday. You don't go out if your team's playing Monday. You now don't go out if your team's playing on Thursday.
Yeah.
And your day is based around, well, where are we watching the game? Like, you a Titans fan? Where are we watching it? that's how big the NFL has become. They own 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So working there was really educational. I think Premier League football learned a lot from the NFL back in the 80s and 90s, how to commercialize their club organization. They arrived on the NFL's doorstep and said, teach us everything about merchandise, everything about marketing, everything about sponsorship and partnerships. And they took that back, and hence the Manchester Uniteds of the world. All of a sudden, you start to see all these co-branded things and merchandise shift and stores and, hey, we could try this, because what Premier League football has is legacy.
Yeah.
The NFL doesn't have legacy yet, but Premier League football has hundreds of years, what feels like hundreds of years of legacy. So I worked there. The Monarchs were in a super competitive city for sports dollars. There are 14 football clubs in London. I think there's 5 Premier League. There's Chelsea, Tottenham, West Ham. I'm missing somebody. Palace,
Arsenal?
Brentford.
Arsenal, Millwall. Like, there's 14 clubs. There were also 2 basketball clubs, 4 Premier League cricket clubs, 3 rugby league premier clubs, and then 3 rugby union clubs. And then there was a hockey club. Like,
Crowded market.
and all the culture, all the tourism, all of the theater, all of the restaurants. So a NFL Europe League team is going to have a hard time finding traction. And ironically, my boss was Oliver Luck, who
Oh, wow.
Andrew Luck's dad.
and he was the kind of president of NFL Europe, and his boss was one Don Garber.
Oh, wow.
So
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I knew Don Garber was in the NFL for a long time before MLS. I didn't know that he was in NFL Europe.
Yeah, he was the president of NFL International.
Okay.
And the architect behind, NFL Europe and keeping it afloat, and the partnership with Fox, because Fox paid for most of NFL Europe's operations. The NFL owners paid $1 million apiece to have kind of the benefit of the 6 teams that were there, but Don oversaw that, and I got a chance to sit with him. Paul Tagliabue would come to games in London, so it was a pretty cool experience because you're getting to watch and see the standards by which the NFL operates. They are the highest standards in sports. Like, you can't put 80,000 people in the stadium and not have super high standards for safety, for taking care of your fans, for really the experiential stuff that really the NFL really can do on their own. That's really untouched.
Beautiful. We're going to run, we're not quite done yet, but we're getting close to a hard out here. So let's transition into some CFC questions and some food questions.
Yeah, we'll definitely. But we'll want to have you back probably by the end of the season or so, sometime during the off season.
Sure.
And,
If you're willing to talk, because I mean we've got a whole segment of your career we haven't even talked about.
Sure, I'm happy to come as often as you want.
Don't tell us that.
don't
tell us that.
tempt us with that one.
But CFC wise, one of the overarching questions, we didn't put it out to a lot of people. We put it out to a select people that we were going to have, and we would love to do a longer listener schedule, but I didn't want to inundate you with, you've been on the job, 30 something days?
Yeah.
Didn't feel like it was fair to let everybody, they can come up to you in person and answer,
Right.
but if you give somebody an online form, they can get a little aggressive with the questions. But one of the main questions is and I'm sure you've heard about 10 different versions of this question, but what are you bringing from someone who hasn't been a soccer executive, at least exclusively a soccer executive? What do you bring from outside of soccer into being a soccer executive?
Well, I tend to look at it, a couple of ways. Number one, I have a partnership with Rod Underwood. Football operations is what he does. And I think my success as an executive is understanding where the lines are and the lanes that you need to be in. I'm CEO, and yes, Rod, technically speaking, reports to me, but I can't tell him how to do his job. And I won't. And I think he's an expert. He knows what he's doing. His record speaks for itself. And so I think number one, what I bring is the ability to separate my job into and hopefully find the right people to do their jobs. So that's number one. Number two, what I bring is years of experience around marketing, years of experience around ticket sales, years of experience around partnership sales, years of experience around community involvement, years of experience around understanding what our balance sheet looks like, what our P&Ls look like, years of experience around how to grow and mentor staff, years of experience around learning how to build relationships in markets, whether that's London, Edinburgh, Manchester, Atlanta when I was in the WNBA, New York over 7 years. So I bring that to Chattanooga. The thing that I think I bring now most is the ability to ask questions and be curious about what people would like to see and how they want to participate in the club that they love. And then trying to figure out how to do that efficiently. Look, there's no secret. If we could get attendance up and we get more fans and we get more season ticket holders and we get younger fans and we get female fans, like, this isn't rocket science. Like, we're clear about our mission. How do we impact the community? How do we do the right thing by the community? And how do we do more in the community so that we become, the talking point? This town is up for and ripe for us being such a central part of people's lives that, what are you doing Saturday? What do you mean, what am I doing Saturday? I'm going to a game. Like, that's where the foundation has been very solidly placed for us to build on. There are ways that I can bring different ideas. Like, what do we do with fan experiences? Can kids and groups participate in things that they've never been able to participate in before? Whether that's pregame, halftime, postgame. Like, what do we do to enhance the fan experience and to create even better outcomes going forward? And that's what I bring, the ability to listen and hopefully, in partnership with what our existing fan base is, what the city wants to do, what the region could want to do with our club to make it bigger and better and more efficient and more fun. Because this sport is about joy. This sport is about fun. This sport is about enjoyment. There's a passion for A, the sport, but B, the club. And you want to harness that. And how do you include more people?
I love that. A couple rapid, and I have a million questions on that, but I'm going to save them for another time. A couple rapid fire food questions. Pineapple on pizza?
No.
Coffee?
Tea.
Tea. How do you take your tea?
With lemon and honey.
Okay.
No milk.
No milk.
No milk.
Even 20 years in England, still no milk.
The first day somebody offered me tea, I was like, that'd be great. So they made the tea, and I said, what is that in the tea? And it was milk, and I was like, yeah, no.
Absolutely not.
That's not an option.
Regular fries, sweet potato fries, or tots?
Regular fries with Lowry seasoning salt.
There we go.
Okay.
Love that.
Okay.
Best fast food burger?
Wendy's.
Best fast food fries?
McDonald's.
What is your ideal burger like? Wendy's or otherwise, but how do you get your burger?
Actually, I'm going to recant my best burger. There's a place in New York called Jackson's Hole. The greatest hamburgers ever made is Jackson's Hole in New York. The burger's about that big. The best way to have a burger is cheese, bacon, lettuce, tomato, mustard, ketchup, and of course, no onions.
I knew you were going there.
No onions.
How do you get your steak cooked?
Well done.
Done.
Medium well, no red. Closer to well than medium.
Steak sauce?
A1 or whatever the restaurant's steak sauce is.
So you are not a medium rare kind of guy.
No, I am well done.
All right. And what kind of sides with your steak?
Salad, baked potato, anything orange, carrots, corn, green beans. Don't do cauliflower. I do broccoli. That's a late thing in my life.
Broccoli?
Adding broccoli.
Yeah, the whole broccoli thing was like, yeah. But then I had a really good family friend who figured out how to make it taste like good. And then I've been a broccoli convert.
Hot dogs.
All beef, mustard. That's it.
My guy.
No ketchup, no onions. Chili now and again, but I have to be somewhere that I'm not around other human beings because chili dogs get messy.
Yes, they do.
And I don't want
Yeah.
people to be like, what a slob that guy is.
Last one. You're feeling like you need a cheat meal, right? You're like, I need the greasiest fast food. What's the guilty pleasure?
Fast food would probably be either a street taco from some place that you put your stomach at risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you find, which I have yet to try, but I have seen in Chattanooga, street side barbecue joints that, like, you see it and you're passing this on the corner of a gas station and it's the guy that's like, he's got the smoker and he's got everything and it's like, that's gotta be good.
But it's also the same risk.
Your stomach is at risk, but I know that if I see a guy at a gas station with a smoker and I know he has been there all day, I know that there's a pretty good chance that he's cooked that meat through and through. He's put something on it.
Yeah.
You know, he's put his whole thing into it.
The secret ingredient might be
Yes,
love.
Right.
Which
The
is,
addendum to that question is if you were making something at home for a comfort meal.
I would flatbread. Something that's quick, easy, doesn't take a whole lot to do. Are we breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
your choice.
Breakfast, French toast.
There you go.
I do really good French toast. My wife would never say that, but she'd say, like, you never made it for me. But that's because it's unique to me. French toast and a BLT.
Okay.
I'm a BLT fan.
Love that. Well, Alton, thank you, first of all, for coming today. I think one of the things that makes, and I think you understand this, one of the things that makes Chattanooga Football Club different from maybe a lot of the other places is that there is access, right?
Yeah.
There's a connection between the community and the front office. The fact that you're in my living room today is obviously up to you, and so thank you, first of all, for taking that, and for being willing to take on the challenge of guiding our football club in this next chapter. And we're excited to see what it is.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to both you and Matt and Jamie and the fans certainly on Saturday who were very gracious in welcoming me. Like, people don't know me from a hole in the wall, but the fact is, my commitment is listen, learn, see what we do well, do more of that. Because I always, if you were to ask my staff, I always ask this question: well, what is it we do that works? What is it we do that don't work? And what is it we do that is missing? What gives us that context? What's our secret sauce? And for me, literally I just got here and I'm trying to learn the things that work well and stop doing the things that don't work well, because the natural human instinct is let's fix the things that don't work well. No, sometimes it's just let's not do those. There are a bunch of things that we may be missing, and let's figure out what those things are, so that we can add them to what works. And I really want this club to be super successful. On the pitch, off the pitch, I want you as our fans to be proud that when you see us, you go, I'm really proud to be associated with that club, as you have been for the last 15 years, but I want you to be more proud as we continue to grow. I want to grow our staff. I want to grow their skills. but I also want to make an impact and help change the trajectory of some people's lives who, I hope this club can do that, really make a big impact. And in that they feel like we can come to CFC, we can come to games, when we see them in the community, when we see them at events, we feel like that's our club. Those are our guys. Those are our ladies. Our team, our women's team had a huge trajectory change this year.
Absolutely.
And I want to amplify what our women do and the impact that they have in sports. It's even more appropriate now with the Women's World Cup. But I really do want to amplify what our women do, and we're going to figure out ways to do that.
And that's a hard tangent here, but that's a hard conference to break through, which is our next goal, to break into the upper echelons. Second place in the conference just won the WPSL yesterday.
Yeah.
Charlotte Eagles.
It's a wild time, and we're going to get into that, I think, on Wednesday, aren't we, Matthew? This week.
Oh God, are we recording again?
I think it's Wednesday. But anyway, let's end right there, Alton. Again, thank you, and listeners, we'll catch up soon. Peace.